And if truth be known, probably fishing cost me my marriage. I had to make a choice. Do I want to still go fishing, or do I want to go walking hand in hand around market? I wanted to go fishing. Scalesmen feel quite pressured on a live TV programme with a presenter saying, "What has he got?" and a camera shoved in his face. It's always going to make mistakes because it's not normal for most people to have that. It's not. It's really difficult. He looked like him on his last legs. He's got a little tin with his maggots in. And I walked past him. I can remember my exact thoughts was, that's 1 point in pocket. And then you got the other one where it was misread and give it as in pounds and kilos. It was obvious to everybody what had gone off. Fishing for me started quite early, really. I actually went fishing from the first ever time I was 4. My dad fished as a young man. My brother fished, who was 6 years older than me. And he had a couple of uncles who used to come down from Harrogate, who fished Wharf and Swale and all them sort of places up there. And he used to come down, we used to go to Idle at where it actually forms, where the two rivers meet and create the Idle, just outside Retford at Bothamsall. And he'd go roach fishing there. And at 4 he took me with him. We sat on box and had a little play. I can always remember the River Idle was always renowned to be a big roach river. So if you caught a roach in there, it was £1, £1.50, and that was true up until 80s. But it was always renowned as a big roach river. Some days odd chub, but brilliant. So he took me down there, and I watched him catching a few. My dad took me and I sat behind him and had a little go and caught a couple of fish. I can't remember what there was. Basically, I'd be holding rod. And at 6, he came down when I was 6, stopped with us, and Retford AA had got a junior match on in town on Chesterfield Canal. My granddad took me up there, and my uncle Val came up with me, and my uncle George, and they sat behind me. I caught an eel, a perch and a roach, I believe. I think he had £1.4, £1.5 or whatever. I can't remember exact weight. But I won. I won the age group, which was from 6 to 10, I think. And then the next group was from 10 to 14 or 15, something like that. So, and I won it, and I got a little trophy, and I made up. And that sort of kicked me off, and I wanted to fish. But not only did I want to fish, I wanted to fish matches and compete and with other people. So that started me fishing. Obviously, my brother was fishing quite a bit, so he used to take me with him. He was being 6 years older. So when I was like 14, he was 20, he got a car and was running about and took me to places. He was worked for West Burton Power Station, so he was in electricity board, and they used to have a national, and they used to go down to Welland and Neen, and there'd be bus loads of them, and I'd go with them and that as a young lad. And then I joined a local club, which was Retford Railway Club, which had some cracking angles in it. Ian Turner was there, Fishing Mania, one winner, and some other lads, really good lads, Fish for Worksop, national squad. And from them, I learned how to fish, really, how to fish and compete. And if one thing I went in for was river fishing, and bream fishing. He got me into fishing rivers properly and learnt loads off him and some other lads there. And then it's a process of putting it all together. But that's where my commitment to match fishing come, and competing. I love my river fishing. Like I say, it was what I wanted to do. I didn't want to go to school. I wanted to fish. That has its detrimental side when that's all you wanted and all you think about is fishing. But I can honestly remember that the only day that I never went fishing was Christmas Day. That only days I used to go Boxing Day, New Year's Day. I used to fish in town centre, what we call Swannock's Bridge. It goes through town on River Eye, the little peg just above there before they put the weir in. And there was a funny shaped stone. And if water was just lapping this stone, I could go down there, no matter when it was, and I'd always catch some chub and dace, odd roach then. It had swapped, and let all rivers go through different phases, become less of a roach river, more of a chub and dace. And you go down there, catch £20, and there'll all be all people walking over at Town Bridge, and you'd be running your stick float down a tiny bottle. Again, like I said, I made kit, a little homemade balsa float that I used to make myself, and little stick floats out of green garden cane. I used to whittle it down and put some balsa on it. So that's where it started from. And one thing is as well, what hooks people into match side is when you're good at something, you want to. It's like if you're a boxer. If you realise you're good at something, you want to push yourself to be even better. It's like kids who ride motorbikes and become really good, and they want to do it as a job, or they race cars, they're good at racing cars, or go-karts. When you find you're good at something at a young age, that's what you want to do. I didn't want to go out drinking with everybody, even though I did occasionally. I wanted to go fishing because drinking ruined my Saturdays and Sundays fishing. So that's where my fishing started. And then, of course, from fishing with a club, my natural progression was to progress into open matches. And one of my favourite ones was that I used to love Works Up Opens on River Chant at Newark. There was 350 pegs, sell-out matches. And I can remember when I first started, the first match I ever fished was in the early 80s, first open match I ever fished. And it was front page news, Pete Palmer won the 350 peg match. I think it was with £12, £10, £12, something like that. Not a big weight, but what was made it really big news, it was with chub. It was the first open match on what we class as Middle Trent to be won with chub. Chub was a real bonus, but he won it. All his fish were chub, or chublets it'd be as we call them now, from below Stinkpipe at Winthorpe. Massive. I don't think I had a bite that day. It was a really cold, horrible day. But that started me off. And one of the things that I loved about the river was you never knew what your next fish was going to be. It'd be a gudgeon, could be a chub. And I can remember, I grew up in my early days when I started fishing my open matches at Burnt Joyce. And I can remember having £11 gudgeon. Every single fish was a gudgeon. And at that time, there were fiberglass rods. Now, my arm was hanging off. God knows how many gudgeon it was, but it was a lot of gudgeon. You basically just lowered it in and moved it 2 foot and you cut a gudgeon. And that was all day, every bit of day. I mean, match were probably one with £16. And rivers go through cycles. They were all gudgeon for a few years, then they disappeared, and all of a sudden we're all chub. Chub were winning all the matches. And I loved it. And a little funny story regarding River Trent. I loved it. When I was fishing Angling Towns Winter League, I was fishing for Worksop. Well, it was down as Retford, but it was actually Worksop. And I was 21, and I remember it like yesterday. For my 21st birthday, my ex-missus bought me a Brennan & Hickman fiberglass seat box and a Brennan & Hickman round Odall, which was just a tube, really, with tubes inside to put your rods in, instead of having a wicker basket and rolling up canvas sheeting. That's what everybody's Odalls was. But I got this 21-year-old, it was a dog's doo-doos. And my chest was stuck out that big walking down riverbank. And I was on Gunthorpe, just below Cowdrink, running on to Cowdrink. And I passed this, just a couple of pegs up from me, this old boy. And he looked older than I am now, like. He looked like him on his last legs. He's got a little tin with his maggots in, and he got a banker's money bag round his neck with he'd sewn a bit of string on it, told it round his neck for his maggots. And I walked past him. I can remember my exact thoughts was, that's 1 point in pocket. Anyway, I had a real good day. If I remember right, I think I had something like £18 a chub. I thought I'm going to win this section today. At that time, then it was fishing really, really well. I thought I might sneak in here with that today because I know it's fished well. I could see people on opposite bank as well that caught a few. So I thought it's fished really well. I might get in today, but definitely with my section anyway. I followed scales up and they come to this old boy and weighed him in, and he got 29 pound a roach, perfect redfin, not chub, not a gudgeon, anything else, just roach. And I was mesmerised. And I didn't know his name at that time. And I spoke to him because one of the things I always do is I always ask people what they've done. I says, what did you have down line? And he says, I had some big uns and some little uns. And he got a little tobacco tin with his shot in. And there's some big and some little ones. And he was actually fishing, because he still got it set up, he hadn't stripped it down, a porcupine float. I thought, I can't believe he's caught all them like that. I just cannot believe. Here's me with me John Dean stick floats or whatever I was fishing at the time. I thought, how's that possible? And I went back to thinking, they said, how you done, Aid? I said, I've had 18 pounds. He said, oh, hell, you might. I said, no. I said, he's had this weight above me like this old boy. He says, what, 2 pegs above you? He says, yeah. He said, was it old boy with a roll-up thing with porcupine? He says, yeah. Johnny Malt, best river angler there'd ever been at that time. Unbelievable. He says, he thinks like a roach, he feeds like a roach, and he chucks maggots and casters and in sometimes sweet corn as well. I said, yeah, that's him. He says, yeah, well, if they don't want sweet corn, I'll catch them on casters. If they don't want casters, I'll catch them on maggots. He feeds everything. He says, I'll catch them on something. And he did. And that sort of brought me down to earth, that you can have all the best tackle in the world, you can look the dog's doo-doos, but it's what's in here that really matters. How them fish think and how you respond to what they do. So, match fishing, it's things like that draw you in and keep you going there, that you see these people. And I've seen them in past on. Rob Hitchens is a prime example. Rob Hitchens couldn't fish, but at Ayfield, when he got onto trout plates and making paste up, when he worked it out, he got to Ayfield and he won like 14 matches in a row. And he was winning that many that nobody else was going. In fact, I was there once. He says to his dad went with him, he says, I'll not fish today so you can win it. And who won it? His dad. So they banned him from fishing because they'd gone from having like 50 people turning up to matches to 7 and 8 because he was winning every one. And that's side of it, I love that side of things, that how match fishing moves and changes and varies, and people who are brilliant 4 or 5 years, all of a sudden their methods go, and unless they change and move along with the times, fall by wayside. And that happens to so many. So match fishing is fluid like everything else.
You have been with Garbolino for so many years. How has the brand developed since you first started?
How did I become involved with Garbolino? I qualified for a Fishermania. I was using an Abu pole at the time, which was a really strong pole. Nothing wrong with the pole. But really ever, at 16 metres, it was a nightmare. And I've known Darren for a lot of years, from early 90s, and slightly before really, but in the 90s we went to Denmark together. Darren was there and we got chatting. And obviously at New Quay, he used to fish New Quay festivals as well. And I went up for a new pole. I thought I need a decent quality pole. And Darren at that time had just took over running a Garbolino. And I says, I'm after a pole. He says, well, look, what I'll do, I'll put you in contact with a tackle shop and I'll get them to work you a really good deal out. He says, they'll give you what you want and they'll do it at the right price because I've asked them to for you. So says, and it also puts a tackle through a tackle shop rather than coming direct from me. I said, yeah, no problem. And he got me a pole. Now, the pole was really made for silvers fishing. It wasn't really a carp pole. And when they realised that the pole wasn't really up to carp fishing at the time, they issued everybody who bought one with a number 9 and a number 8 section to strengthen the pole up. Then there was no problems. There were no problems. But everybody who bought one, which I thought were unbelievable, everybody who bought this pole, which was called Super League, because Garbolino and his team who he fished for, which was Starlets, had won the Super League, so they named it the Super League pole. And then Darren had a word with me when I were down at Whiteacres. He said, would you like to come and be part of Garbolino brand? We've been keeping an eye on your fishing and you're catching loads of fish, winning loads of matches. He says, give us a ring when you get back. Well, truth be known, I completely forgot about it. He got into me fishing and I never rung Darren. And then I saw him again. I said, look, Darren, I really apologise. And he says, yeah, come on board. It'll start off small at first because we're growing as a company in the UK. And it'll get better. And it did. When we brought out the Power Legion, I've never seen, it's probably the best selling single pole in UK market ever, that pole. Everybody had it. And it was massive, absolutely massive. And from then, we moved into the rod market with the Super Gs and the G system. Tremendous rods. The 9, 10 foot, 11 and 12 foot rods for bream fishing at that time was unbelievable. Everybody wanted a 10 foot and 11 foot for the breaming anywhere. And I got involved with making glass tips for them. I made some for Darren. And people now still, they're a cult rod. People still use them. And people ask me, have you got any you want to sell? Can you have them? I'm down to just 3 9-footers now. But I love them. We've got the new extra light ones, which is as good, but it's a mindset. I've got them all. I've got the similar rods, but they are a cult rod. And being involved with brand, I've really liked that side of things. Being involved with, if you ask Darren, I said, I'm fishing at Lindholm all the time. We want a rod that's soft for fishing a little waggler for F1s. So I chopped up one of our 13-foot rods and cut butt down and cut some sections out and said, glued it back together and said, we want something like that for finesse, for fishing light lines for F1s. And they all laughed at me, but eventually it sunk in and we brought a light version out that we use. And I love that side. I love that side of being involved with tackle. I've always been one for altering stuff and modifying it and messing about with things and trying to improve what I think is going to make something better than it actually is. It doesn't always work that way, but I quite often see there's a need for X. Can I turn Y into X? It'll do what I want it to do because nobody makes X at the minute. So I've always messed about with that. And the brand's brilliant. The brand's brilliant. Darren's brilliant, Simon Fry's brilliant, world champion. Cracking set of lads. The old lads who fish with us who all help each other. If you phone anybody up and want some advice, if you want to give some advice, they're on to you. And it's brilliant, brilliant.
You love to tinker with tackle and make things better. Do you like the product development side of things?
Tinkering with tackle and being involved with product development side has always been something that I've really liked, like I said. An instance of how I am is when I said we used to fish on canals fishing with bloodworm before I took on the carp fishing side at Allcroft. One thing I found was poles are different to what they are now, but I used to have my pole. Used to have a cup that was actually screwed to the top and it had like a plastic bolt underneath, so it was actually sat on top of your pole, and you put at that time 3 quid's worth of bloodworm, which was a fortune, into your pot with a bit of leam. You ship it out, it'd spin and drop out onto halfway across or a third of the way across. It was infuriating, but everybody had the same problem. You had to really grip onto your pole and be like a genius to get it out to 12 metres to drop it where you want it, or 10 metres. And I sat in my back garden for ages thinking, well, this can't be right. I've got practicing. That was, I put a bucket halfway down the garden. I lived here at the time. Get 12 metres of pole in my back garden, get a bucket and then try and ship it out. I put a little pebble in, see if I could get it into my bucket without dropping it, and it was 50%. There's got to be a better way than this. There's got to be a better way, because their poles were cumbersome as well. And a guy showed me what I call a swing pot, which was basically a pot that was a little tiny aerosol lid that was a piece of fishing line either side. You tie it on, it had a loop, and you'd hang the extra bit of line onto the hook, and you ship it out, let it onto water, and it had a piece of cork on one side, so it'd overbalance your pot, and your little ball of bait would drop out, and then you'd lift it up, it'd come undone, bring it back in, and hang it back up again. A bit of an ingenious way of doing it, but it didn't matter how windy it was or how rough it was, because it was underslung, it was swinging about, and you never lost your pot. So I thought, there's got to be a better way than this, but that did it. So I come up with, sat out in my garden with, when I put my pot on, and it tipped upside down, I thought, why can't I have it the other way around? And I've got some little bits that I mess with. They look a bit crude now, and this is what I got out of my shop. But that was my first attempt at what I did, which is basically an aerosol lid. It's a Shimano Diaflash, believe it or not, because that was my pole they had at the time. 2 pieces of top kit through it, alodited and taped up there. It looks messy, but when you ship that out with a full ball on, rest it on your knees at, say, 8 metres with the rest of your sections on pole, on rollers, it just sat there like that. Where before, because it was on the top like that, you put one on top, it did that and spun round and dropped your ball. This, you could sit it there. It wanted to be that way up, not that way up. And I believe I'm the first person to fish with this type of pole pot that we use, everybody uses now. Now, at that time I was going down Allcroft as well, and people noticed it. Then a guy from Mansfield altered it, and he put a piece of, through where that is there, he put a loop of coat hanger, the wire coat hangers, put 2 ends in the pole, spun it round till it was tight on his cup, and then you could pop your cup off so you could get in the old one and have a pot on, like mine had got a permanent pot on. And I thought that was brilliant. But this, I think, is the very first ever one where it was actually like that underneath. And he took it on from there. Now it's gone to what we do now. I showed Vinnie Smith it. Vinnie Smith, the Northwest lads, used to come down to Allcroft at that time, and I showed him it, and they were really impressed with it. Now, whether he passed it on to Tattle Trade, I don't know, but I believe I was the first person to do that. So that's a bit of a claim to fame, but nobody knows about. But that's where I am. I mean, I've got some more little bits here that I've done. These are our pole pots that we used to have. Now, originally, it was just a pot that clipped on with an hole in the top, and to feed pellets. Now I put some pole elastic through so you could flick it like that. Now the reason being is, by the time you've popped that off and clipped it back on, and it's time. This was always quicker, and it just fill it up like that with a few micros or number 4s, click it back down, ship it down, and you just tip a few out at a time. Little tiny funnel on top. There's a bigger one that I hadn't even drilled through in the past. I didn't even put elastic in that one. These are bought ones, and again, you know, just speed. When you're trying to, these ones are really quick. When you was trying to catch F1s in shipping out, tapping a few micros in, if you had to pop your lid off and put it on or press it in, this one I could just dribble in 6 or 8 micros. And speed that you got to do it to fill that in, close it, and shipping it out. Over a match, that might get another 15 minutes fishing. Now, which don't seem a lot, but when you only want, say, 2 bites in 15 minutes, it's 2 bites that nobody else can get because they're busy filling up. So it does make a difference. All these things, I don't use these now. I don't use micros on a pole anywhere now. But, you know, there's still things that I've kept. But that's the sort of thing that I used to like to do to improve that, to make it better. So me fishing was quicker, and people used to see it, or I might even have nicked that off somebody else who's done it. But I used to always be messing up. I mean, simple thing. I picked a method up today. I picked a Preston method up. Now, you can't buy them like that. What I've done, I think that the inner sleeve is an inch longer. So I've just cut it off and made it smaller and neater and tidier. Does it affect that? No, not really. But in my head, it looks neater and tidier. And I'll not use one with a long stem on these little tiny feeders, especially when I'm winter fishing, because I think a little tiny pile of micros all collapse around that. There's hardly any of that feeder to be seen. But when you've got another inch of arm stuck out, it just makes it a bit more obvious in clear water. So little things like that, you know. Another thing I messed about with, bagging waggler for Jeff Ringer, and Ringers love bagging waggler fishing. The initial start of bagging waggler was pike bungs. The original, very first one was a pike bung, believe it or not, with a M-stack glued in the bottom. And Jeff showed me, he says, oh, the cast's terrible. I says, well, I can improve that. I said, I'll put a carbon stem on, so that's out my box that was left about, that's all that's left of it. But I glue an extra long, probably 8 to 10 inches piece of carbon on. We had a small, very small pipe bum, which had hold that up as a ball of ground bait. And he cast them and they worked brilliant. And then, of course, somebody else sees them, the guy who does them now at Boddington, the really long ones, not that anybody does bagging waggler now, refined it even more. And that's how things start, and that's what happens. And I love that side of things, playing with things and developing it. We brought a range of method feeders out. Well, if I wanted to go to Boddington and cast a long way, I mean, this is the birth, really, of method feeders. I'd measure around the bottom, cut a piece of lead to suit, cut it in half so it was weight forward. So now I've got all my weight at the front of my feeder for cast mega distances. And just things like that, just obvious things. It seems obvious now, but at the time, people say, you managed to cast it that far, and Ringers and everybody else. Well, because we mess with stuff. We don't buy and just use it as it comes. But now, because there's so many people involved with production of fishing equipment, them problems are ironed out a lot sooner than they come to the bank. When they come now, 99% of the time, everything you get is how you want it. If I change it, it's because of this, not because I'm making it better. In my head, I think I am. And if I think I am, it is better for me, because my fishing, I don't want to doubt myself, think that method sat there, fish can see it, it's never going to go round. Because it won't go round. I just know it won't go round. So confidence in what you're doing, that it's right and your equipment's right, is 100% of your fishing, 100%, without a word of a doubt.
You're an 8 times finalist at the Park Dean Masters at White Acres. Should you have won it?
Park Dean, I must admit, I love White Acres. My times going down there, absolutely loved it. I started off with, I went for 1 week in the spring. The year after, I went for 2 weeks in the spring. They opened an October festival, which became the Park Dean week, for 2 weeks. And I used to do 2 weeks in the spring and 2 weeks in autumn. It was the start of my fishing year, when fishing was really good. We'd go down there, catch loads and loads of fish after an hard winter. And it'd end good fishing. We'd go down there for the last 2 weeks in October. Fishing were really good, catching big weights were locally, it had started to ease off. When we came back from really good weeks bagging up, it was really hard up here. It was always a noticeable difference. It was still just coming out of spring when we went down here. It was still hardish up here. Down there was brilliant. We come back and it improved here. So it started a year off. Some good things and bad things about White Acres. Good things was I loved it, caught loads and loads and loads of fish. Bad things was I invited Ringers down. Because believe it or not, after a couple of years, Jeff came down. And there was me, a lad called Alan Barker, who were really good down there. He got a few tricks up his sleeve that we still use, in fact. And Jeff came, we persuaded Jeff to come down. He said, come down and just have a week's holiday with us. You'll love it. You'll catch plenty of fish. Anyway, he came, Jeff, stopped with us. And we said, look, we'll share. The 3 of us in lodge, whatever we get, we split between us. What win and split up, everything. Yeah, great, yeah. Well, Jeff came home, as we all did, with 1,200 quid in his back pocket. Never won a penny himself. And loved it. And he felt really guilty about taking that money, did Jeff, bless him. I said, no, look, it may have been other way round. You may have won everything in us, but that's what it is. That's what it is. So he came down the year after. And I said to Steve, I says, why don't you come, Steve? You'll love it. You'll catch loads of fish. It's right up your street. I don't fish meat. I only fish corn because that's what they used at making. He says, we're all corn fishermen. We're not meatheads. He said, well, come down here. You'll soon swap. Come, get yourself down here. Jeff came, persuaded me to go down. So come down for a week. You'll have a cracking week. Meat fishing to them. When you're a good angler, like I said earlier, you don't take long to swap over. Steve and Phil come, and that were it. The rest is history with them. About festivals that Steve's won down there, and Phil. They loved it, but amount of festivals that we cost each other festivals. Steve and Phil both cost me at least one festival when we're down there, and I loved it. Park Deans, the first year that they introduced the Park Deans, was a 12 peg match, so a 12 qualifier. So it was really difficult to qualify. 180 anglers coming in the top 12. And what they did is the lad who won it had first draw, so he went in, drew his peg, blah blah blah. I went through it like that. I had last pegging bag, no oper, because what they'd done on Jenny's, they put a net across halfway, filled it with small stocky carp like pounders, and all the fish swam up to the net. And first and second come either side of the net. Third and fourth was next two down. Our end peg furthest away from fish with I can't remember who opposite me. But he had one fish. I think I had one fish. That was all we had. So it was really disappointing after really fighting through really hard matches, come 12th and qualify and then be out of it at the draw. And my 8 qualifiers at Park Dean, I have never been on a peg where I've had a chance. I've been leading it sometimes. I've caught some fish from start, first hour and a half, and then I knew it's going to peter away from me, and it peters away. A really strange thing about Whiteacres, I qualified for a final, and I drew peg 9, I think it was, and the lad who drew peg 4, I walked down, I says, well, you don't want to be on that. I says, I ran that last year. There were no fish in front of that island. I was just on Corner Island. Anyway, cut long story short, he went and won it. Won Park Dean's off peg 4. I thought, I can't believe that. Year after, lad drew peg 9, the one I'd been on the year before. There were no fish. And he won it off same peg. So even though I've said I've never drawn a peg where I've had a chance of winning it, the pegs varied, because if you were fishing for carp, you could catch them. If it was F1s, so Carassios, it was quite often Carassios and F1s, they moved about a bit, but generally opposite that island, peg 6 and opposite in the 40s was where you wanted to generally be, loads of fish there. But it depended whether you wanted carp, and some carp in there were really big. But apart from drawing them 2 pegs that I'd won it off, I'd never drawn one that I'd been within a shout with before. So beat by the draw. I can give a funny story about Whiteacres. My mate Phil Ringer, obviously we used to share a lodge, me, Phil and Steve. And Phil's always been really good with the horses. He's had in fact, he owns horses, race horses as a part of a syndicate with his dad, with Jeffrey. And he's always liked to bet. And he won a Park Dean festival on the phone with a newspaper betting on his horses. And a couple of guys said to me, I don't know how he does it. He's won today at Ballingy with like £220, and he's had paper in his hand and been on phone with his bets all day. And he says, not only did he do it on here, he did it on Match Lake, done it at Gwinear, every match, he was on the phone booking his horses. And he's the only person I know who's won a festival with a phone in his hand and a newspaper on his lap. But that's down to quality angle that Phil is like.
You're a Fishermania champion. Tell us about what happened and how you won the title.
My Fishermania life. The very first ever Fishermania was the guy who I used to travel with at that time, a lad called Ian Turner. Qualified on with him. I can remember it like it's yesterday. I didn't even get a ticket because I thought it were a con. I thought nobody's going to win £25,000. It's a con. Ain't going to happen that. Anyway, Ian qualified, just beat Alan Scott on. I think it was like £11-12 of eels or something. Just pipped Alan Scott on and qualified. And it was at Mallory Park. And Ian said to me, I ain't got a rod that can chuck what I need to chuck. He'd been and had a look at equipment that lads were using. He says, you've got 11-13, haven't you? A dial whiskey Kevlar. I said, yeah. I said, have you got a Shimano bait runner? I says, yeah. He says, can I borrow it? I said, yeah, of course you can. And he actually won Fisherman, as everybody knows. But it was my rod and my reel. So that straight away become my best mates won it. I want to try and do that. Well, year 2 I never got a sniff. But I only, at that time, I only went to my local venues where I knew were going to do well, Witham, and Neen, because there were big matches, there were 300 peg matches to qualify. There was 8 300 peg matches. And there ain't no commercials at 300 pegs that you could fish, I don't think, at that time. And because he won it, I wanted to emulate him, really. Year 3, Steve Ringer qualified, and it was down at Allcroft. So Jeff phoned me and says, Steve's qualified, you know. I said, yeah. He says, well, he wants you to give him some coaching. I said, well, he's welcome to come and stop with me, come up and do whatever he likes. And I put him right, because at that time we were catching loads of skimmers. We had a method sorted out, which meat, it was all meat fishing for skimmers, liquidised meat, fishing little tiny bits of meat, and that's what we wanted to do. Carp was a bonus. If you caught a carp at that time, it was a bonus. Well, there was other areas where you could catch a few carp. But anyway, Steve asked me to be his bank runner. We went down, got him set up, got him fishing it. And Steve does what Steve does, put it together in his own way, like everybody else does, I suppose, really. And I had a serious bet on him. Jeff had an even bigger bet on him. I thought he's unbeatable. We're coming into the last hour and it's fished dismal, really. And he started to fizz his peg. I said, he's going to catch now. So I said to him, give it a small ball like a conker, mainly full of chopped up meat. Fish a red worm and a little piece of meat on, because then bream at that time, that was your way to catch skimmers and bream there. And he did it. I said to Jeff, go and put me another £100 on him. I think Jeff had 300 or 400 where was maxed up on him, because it was just out and he had a little run. But he got a carp, and he'll tell you himself, he got a carp and cameraman run down to film him. And when you're young, first time in a big match like that, under a lot of pressure, things go wrong that should never go wrong. But cameraman come running down to him, and he wanted to shove it up his rollers. Cameron was stood there, so he spun it round a bit. He went into his peg number, which said Steve Ringer, and had his weight on, hit that, and he broke off a section early and started to lift it up, and he lost it. Now, he lost that match by 4 ounces. In last dying seconds at match, Dave Pimlett got one, and that beat him by, I think it was 4 ounces. And I was devastated for him. I was devastated for me as well, because it cost me an absolute fortune. But with a little bit of luck, I'd have won that. And I thought, he's that close. I thought, if I'd have been sat there, I'd have been, that, not saying that wouldn't have happened to me, what happened to him, but I'd have been in a chance of winning that match. I thought, it's just a matter of qualifying. Then it moved to Ayfield, and I qualified that year. And the first year, I should have really won it. I made some stupid schoolboy errors. I changed all my lines on my reels. Steve was fishing, and in practice, the amount of fish we caught was unreal. We were using expanders, 8mm expanders. And the ones that we used to cover them with boiling water, give them a slight squeeze. They were as firm as anything. You could cast them on a waggler, wherever you want to do. There were one day when Steve had so many fish on a waggler, it was unbelievable. And we thought, well, we're unbeatable. One of us is going to win this. Well, of course, wind changed direction, blew opposite end, where all fish had been in weeks and weeks and weeks, they just wasn't there. I'd drawn down at the bottom end, opposite end at Dead Bay. But there's a rope on it, and what fish tended to do with that much pressure from crowd was go back off to the other side of the rope. Well, where I was, you could actually see them because they got a lot of shadow, and they'd come back in, you cast one and you get one or two. And I started catching some fish, and then it just petered out. I mean, I lost a few fish, but what gets to you is the crowd as well. You've got a crowd down saying, I can't believe he's lost another, they don't know what's happened, I know it's foul looked. So, and I remember Alan Scotton, when I watched it back, Alan Scotton was in studio and he said, I know in his Yorkshire accent, I've known Steve Cooke a lot of years, and he's a good lad, he'll come on, he'll win it now, there's some fish there, he's going to go and win this. And it petered out and I never won it. Move on to next year, I fish it. Steve's fishing it again. And I collared Alan Scotton the night before at the ball. I said, Alan, don't you mention that I'm going to win it ever again. Because if you do, I'm going to hold you under water. He's a big lad, Alan. I said, I'm going to hold you under water by your feet. And he laughed. He just laughed. Well, I got to my peg. There was a few fish stopping. Jeff sat with me. But as we always did, obviously that was my third. This was my third Fishermania. I'm a big believer in fate. So when I got on Fishermania ball, and the ball then was a proper shirt and tie, proper thing, table, all free wine on tables, a band on, really, really impressive. And the previous winner from the year before, they used to march them all in. Ian Turner, year one, such and such, year two, Dave Pimlett, year three, blah, 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 blah. And march them all in year four, Dave Pimlett. So. And brilliant, it was brilliant. Now, even if you never qualified as the next winner, you're invited back to the ball. And I says, well, whatever happens, I'm going to enjoy my night because it's hardest bit is getting here. Tomorrow will look after itself. So I drew, which I think was one off at Ireland, which is probably peg 15, something like that, where it is now. Today's peg, I can't remember what fishing number. I think it was that 7, something like that. 2 down from me is Steve, but it was more of a pronounced, I'm a little bit further out than him. And there's fish topping everywhere. And I sat on my box, filling my face full of paracetamols and drinking as much water as I could get in because I had a massive hangover. And Jeff looked at me and says, I cannot believe the biggest day of the year, we spent all year trying to qualify for this, you're in this state. I said, I'll be all right, Jeff, I'll be all right, He said, I'm going to talk to Stephen. I said, I can't believe it. He went down to see Stephen. Stephen was even worse than me. So he come back chuntering to himself, says, I can't believe, Perry, I just cannot believe you've got yourself like this. But once you start fishing, you get in your zone, start catching a few fish. And then that was a catalogue of disasters with scales. I mean, we've heard all scales problems that they have. They weighed me in one way in. I led that Fishermania every round apart from one when Robbie Hitchens took my lead. But the one he took they took 10 kilo off me because they weighed me in, and Jeff's watching him weighing in on the dial scales. And he says to the guy who weighing in, he says, it ain't gone round, that's only 5 kilo, it's not 9 kilo. Oh, yeah, yes, you're right. And then marked up as 5 kilo. And then Jeff come down and said to me, he says, you're going to give 10 kilo then? I shouldn't have said that, should I? I said, no. I said, did I find out? I said, yeah, you've done the right thing. He said, but how many more has it happened to? I said, well, as long as we're right, that's all. I'm interested in catching my fish. And Jeff's job is to make sure that it's all above board. Actually, bank runner's job. A couple of weigh-ins later, they did exactly the same again. And they give me 9 kilo. And Jeff says, I've told him again. But he says, I've been doing this years. This is what it is. That's what it is. I know what I'm doing. And then they put my fish in my net. Well, of course, TV cameras spot it, and they know it ain't gone round. So Keith Arthur's said back, says, that was only 5 kilo, not 9 kilo, what you've given. So then there's all of a Ferrari. While I'm still fishing, they decided to take all my fish out and weigh all my fish. to make sure that the weight was 5 kilo and not 9 kilo. And quite rightly, it was. Now, because I'm having a peg-to-peg battle with Steve Jackson off Next Peg, in my head, I'd said if I lose this by ounces, I'm going to ask for all this fish to be reweighed. Because when fish have been in your net, they lose weight. They get a bit agitated. All the food that's inside them, they regurgitate it up. And that's why you get full of sweet corn or whatever in your net. So that's what I'd made in my head. If that happens, if it's ounces, we're going to go for a reweigh of this. So we're both on a level playing field. Because they didn't actually take just 5 kilos. It was slightly more than 5 kilos that took off me. Because I've got fish in my net that had been weighed once and sort of regurgitated the meat up and the food up and what have you. And then it was, like I said, it was a peg-to-peg battle with Steve Jackson off Next Peg. And I'll never forget that one that flies through the air and as they're shouting down, they're counting down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I had a small carp flying through air into my net just as they shouted time, which counted. But as luck would have it, I don't think I'd have needed it, but it'd have been close. And I won by 400 grams. But it was quite nerve-wracking. But things went my way. It could have easily gone other way. To win a big event like that, you need the stars to be aligned for you. And Fishermania become mine and rest at Ringers. It became our thing every year to try and qualify for it, that we qualified. And Jeff used to have a Peugeot 308 estate car. And that's had £100,000 of winnings in that from 4 matches. Because I won it, Jeff won it, and Phil won it in that car, 75,000 should I say, in winnings in that one car. So it was deemed as his lucky car. But Fishermania, everything, we used to fish every single match. But it was really difficult then. 350 pegs on New Junction Canal to win one, it takes a lot. Where it sort of lost a little bit of that on commercial venues because there was that 100 peggers, more to fish, so it made it easier for you to try and qualify. But people ask, Steve, how come you qualified so many times? The reason I don't qualify so much now is, one, I don't travel too far, and I'm getting older. But one thing we all learnt very early, the lads that do really well in this, is if I went to, shall we say, Lindome, and I'd say, right, winning weights at Lindome over 5 hours is going to be 120, 130 pounds in today's conditions. No shallow fish, it's blowing a gale. It's going to be 140, 150 pounds. I could draw worst peg on lake and I'd fish for 150 pounds. You know, not win a section, but I'm fishing to win and qualify. I want fishing for a section. I want fishing to come second or third. Was fishing to win. So when you got a peg that you got a chance of, you'd fish for that 150 pounds. Sometimes you go on a peg that's got half a chance and turn it into a winning peg. And that's the mindset you have to have. And I still have that mindset in all my fishing, that I try to win every single match I sit down of. I do bugger some pegs up sometimes by being too aggressive. But it's a mindset, and that's how you qualify for your big matches, is to have that mindset in your head that that's what I need to do, that's what I'm going to fish for. I'd sooner go down swinging than end up punch drunk. So that's how I look at it.
Tell us what happens on the day of Fishermania now, as you're part of the Sky Sports commentary team.
From doing all the Fishermania matches and trying to qualify, which I still try to do odd one locally, I've now been involved with commentating, and I love that side. And to be fair, the years when I never qualified, they always used to ask to come up. Keith Harvey used to come up and do some chatting with us and chat about qualifying and lads, what they're doing and how they proceed in joint day. And I love that side of thing. Being part of that side, you see a different perspective to it, because you've got all the cameras there. You can see it, probably 8 or 9 people at any one time who's fishing, and you can watch people who's catching, who's stopped catching, what's caused that. And everybody has it like a pofar, a faux pas. and I can remember when Almy was winning it, and we spoke to him live on thing. I said, "That's it. It's yours. There's nobody going to beat you now. There's half an hour to go. You're in front. There's nobody catching." I said, "You've slowed up a little bit, but nobody's catching." And then disaster for Art. Just round corner, the starts catching down his edge, catching carp, and he's catching them really, really quick. And powered in front, and the lad next to him started to catch. And that last half an hour, Art never had anything and ended up third. And even now, I can't believe that he's came third when he's been in front. He's had it all under control. But it just shows you how quick things can change. And what caused that, we analysed that. What caused it was he's in front, last hour, coming into the last half an hour, the crowd behind him gets really big. And at Westwood Lakes, there's not a lot of room. So the crowd builds up behind you, and what happens is the fish must spook. And it is a big crowd behind you. And when you look around the lake, there's areas with virtually nobody. Well, that's what happened. Big crowd behind him, they left all the other people, and the lad went away, caught his carp down his edge, and won match. Now, would that have happened if that crowd hadn't have been there? We don't really know, but that looks like the best bet. And we see that sort of things on camera. You can see the migration of people around the lake to people who's catching. There might not be family and friends, they're just people who want to watch him and be there and see this lad win it. But what it actually does, it ruined his chances of winning it. And I'm 100% sure that if the people had stopped as there was in the same place as we're now and a half to go, he would have carried on and won it. He just dried out his fish. His fish spooked and moved a little bit further away. And that's one of the things about fishing me, and that's one of the things that I've learned being in front of the camera and being behind the camera. Now I'm at the other side looking at the filming side of things and the people and what's happening around the lake with other people, where they're fishing, what's happening. You get a bigger picture, and it's a massive help for people and that's why the bank runners nip about sometimes and have a look around, see what people's catching, or get somebody else who's going to have a look what he's doing. Because obviously, at one time, you used to have the half-hour weigh-in and they'd shout it out. So I knew that I was 10 kilos in front or a kilo behind. They don't do that now. They have to ask the runner what am I behind, who's in front, and then they'll get some of the friends who's behind. They might nip and say to them, go and see what he's doing. Is he catching shallow? Is he catching on the bottom, to keep them informed? But we see that. I can see that on the filming that we've got. And it's a massive difference. But then you get your old hands like Jamie Hughes. He just turns up and does his stuff. Again, like I said, I always said that if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. Jamie's had a lot of meant to be's and he's done it. He's drawn the right peg and done what he does, is catch fish. But when you're not on the right peg, no matter how good you are, you come unstuck and you can't walk away with that trophy. There's nobody better than Jamie Hughes at that game. But you've got to have like I said, you've got to have your slice of luck, and things have to roll your way a little bit. A good peg, put him on half a peg, Jamie. And, I've said in commentary that Jamie Hughes is the last person you want on your tail in one of the big matches. And like the Power hasn't managed to win one yet, but he's had some close calls there. And the calibre of angle that you've got now gets better and better and better every year. So I enjoy being behind that side and talking. But what people don't understand is the amount of people who watch that is in hundreds of millions, I would have thought, worldwide. Now, one thing I've learnt is that not many people watch that who actually fish. There's far more people watch it who's never fished before in their life, who watch it for an entertaining programme, watch people catching fish, and don't understand what jigging is, don't understand what laying on bottom is, what a carp is, what's the difference between a carp and an F1. So we have to explain it and talk to the camera as though these people are, to a fisherman, they say, well, why is he treating us like a bit of an idiot? Because he's explaining to what he's doing, that he's lifting line. And when we say mending the line or he's fishing with back shots, we actually go in and explain to that. Because nearly everybody who's a fisherman who's on the banks who fish know most of that. Don't need me to tell them. But majority of people who watch it don't fish. So, you know, I get comments sometimes saying, well, why do you go into all that information about lifting and lowering and wind affecting the end of his pole, which you don't see on a film from a certain angle, but when they put an overhead camera on it, you can see his pole tip that's moving and swaying in the wind, which has caused his float to move about so he don't catch. And he said, well, because majority of people who watch it don't fish. You know, I've got friends I used to work with. Every year he says, right, a lad called Dave. I forgot his name now. Anyway, Dave I used to work with, he used to say, Fishermania, I stop in every year and sit and watch it. Because I say, I ain't got a clue about fishing, I don't want to learn fishing. So it's a great day in front of telly. So, and that's the sort of people you have to cater for when you explain to them what's happening and why things are going on in fishing. With me doing the presenting with Rob Palmer, and Rob Palmer's brilliant. Rob Palmer never fishes, but Rob Palmer's picked up over the years of doing what we do and chatting. He understands some of the what we're talking about now, and he's really good at getting you in to say my bit or Emma's bit or whatever we need to say. But we go down the night before, we stop with anglers, have a few beers, chill, get up in the morning nice early, have a breakfast. This is all paid for by Sky Sports. And then meet up early on the bank, get wired up for sound, get behind the cameras, make sure everything's all right, get a spot where we're going to stand. You have to stand in the same spot. You know, like 2 years ago, it rained nearly all day. And I said to the guy, I said, well, is it, we'll be all right, we're undercover. He said, yeah, it'll be all right, it's plastic flooring and everything for you. Like, you might get a bit damp because you've got to stand outside. I said, right, fair enough. So I turned up in a pair of Converse shoes, and it was a mud bath. The plastic we had to stand on were plastic sheeting. Well, it was horrendous. It was horrendous. But that was a bit of miscommunication between everybody. But the actual day's brilliant. It's brilliant going through all that. People coming up chatting to us in breaks. But what everybody thinks it's really easy to be stood in front of a camera, talking fishing and explaining what people's doing. We're there from 9 o'clock in the morning. I don't get away till 5:45. Stood on your feet, you sit down, there's a 2-minute break, we have to have a drink, nipped at loo, get back, be in position for 2 minutes, so you got a minute. It's busy and it's hectic and it's stressful at times. And especially when we had another scales problem the other year. And the weighing the top three was down to me. I sort of said, look, you can't weigh just the top two, because because I knew that fish lose weight in your net. If the guy who was winning it, which was Dave, if Dave had been 2 kilo lighter, for an instance, and the guy who was in second place was Kieran, was 1 kilo 500 lighter, it meant he was winning it. But what if is the third place man, because it was so close, there wasn't that much between all three, if it may have took him below what he got on his net. And he's in third place, but he's won it because his fish have been tipped back. So I said, you've got to do all three and work it from that. The weights are always going to be less. And there's quite a few reasons for that. And I've seen this over a number of years. Scalesmen feel quite pressured on a live TV programme with a presenter saying, what has he got? And a camera shoved in his face. It's always going to make mistakes because it's not normal for most people to have that. It's not. It's really difficult. And people have different ways. Where one of Dave's first ways, the fish were put in the net, put on the scales. The guy's holding the bottom of the net, waiting for the fish to stop moving, and then took it off. It sets. But when he's got his hand there, he must have some weight on his fingers while he's trying to stop them from moving and jumping about. It's saying 5 kilo-ish. He removes his hands, it jumps up to 9 kilos, sets. After it's set, it stops there, and he reads it. Well, people see a sudden 5 kilo jump, and they start asking questions. Now, because I can see it on camera what had gone off, I knew what had happened. And then you got the other one where it was misread and give it as in pounds and kilos. And it was obvious to everybody what had gone off. But end of the day, as was the lad who'd won it, Dave. I'd have been gutted if he hadn't won it. Not that I had a bet on him as well, and I've known him for a lot of years, Dave. The fact is that he'd been announced as winner, and to have it took off, you must be gutting. Honestly, must be gutting. So, who was second was second, who was third was still third. So it worked out all right in the end. But they must get better at them. And last year they did. There was a lot of things put in place to make sure that didn't happen again. But people make mistakes. We're human beings. We're not robots, so people make mistakes. But the actual day's brilliant. I love the night out, night before, having a few drinks with presenters. All paid for, like I say. Stop in a nice hotel, get there nice and early, have us breakfast. What else could you want? Watching people fish.
You now fish 5 times a week. Where are your favourite places to go? And do you still love the competitive side of things?
Well, now I'm retired. I retired just before my 66th birthday, which was just a few weeks ago. I'm 67, so it's just over a year ago we actually retired. I'm fishing more than ever. When I worked, I used to have 10 weeks off. After that, I used to go 8 weeks fishing, 2 weeks holiday with wife, as it was. So I always spent a lot of time fishing and went every weekend, virtually every Saturday and Sunday. Now I'm 5 days a week. I'm up for it just as much now. The only difference is, with being older, is it's a lot more hard work. People don't realise. So many people say, you're tired, you've been fishing all day. When you've been concentrating and thinking about what you're going to do next and what you should be doing, you've got to your peg, you've set yourself up, you've packed up, you've gone back, listen to the result, you come in. It's an all-day job. Like now, it's freezing cold and wet and windy, and you struggle to keep warm. It isn't easy to compete for 5 days. But I see it that every day I put my foot in them boots and get on that bank, I'm as competitive as what I was the day I won Fishermania or the match I won when I was 6. I love the competitive side. I cannot pleasure fish. I hate pleasure fishing, and don't get me wrong, I have done a little bit and enjoyed it. But it's a competitive side, and if I stop competing, as much as I don't like to say it, I'll probably stop going fishing. It's that side of things that I like, trying to beat your peg first of all, extract as much as you can out of your own peg, and then beat your fellow fishermen, your competitors, and fisher women now as well. Having been battered by Emma yesterday. A great bunch of people. I spend most of my time at 2 venues, which is Ayfield and Lindome. Both different. Lindome's got a lot of F1s in and quite a few carp. Ayfield's nearly all carp and a few crassios. Ayfield's mega deep and lends itself to waggler fishing and pole fishing as well as, and bomb and feeder. Lindome's different. We're fishing for mainly F1s. But it's all relative. It's all relative. The catching £20 at Lindome is probably 10 bites, 10 F1s, 8 F1s. If you went to a bream venue and were fishing for bream, you got 10 pulls from 10 bream, you think you had a cracking day. But we get greedy. We all want to try and catch £200 all the time, and we've sort of lost that side of things. And I'm no different to anybody else. I want a good day's fishing every time I sit down in a box. But I'm also aware that some days you can't have what you want. You've got to think about your fishing a lot more, be a bit more selective how you fish, how you feed. But because I only fish 2 venues, basically, you stay in tune. The downside is when I said earlier that I turn up a venue and said, right, today's going to win with £200, I'll draw a peg, sit down a peg and think, I ain't got a chance of catching £50, yet alone £200. Or if £50 going to win it, I ain't got a chance of catching 10. So that starts in a bit of a doubt. But I still fish for me, try and My heart of hearts tells me you ain't going to catch that today. But I still try. I'd probably sometimes leave a few fish in because I'm overfed or whatever. But that's in my makeup, my DNA is to try and always do that. But these two venues are brilliant. The people who run them are brilliant. Sometimes some people you can either take or leave. Robin at Ayfield, I love him to bits. He's just had an operation, had some of his lung removed. Good as gold. Nola's a one-off, but I tell you what, her enthusiasm for fishing and fishermen and her lakes and her swans is unbelievable. She keeps it really nice and tidy and beautiful up there. Excuse me, Aaron and Neil at Lindome. Once Aaron's built his house, it'll be full steam ahead. It's good, and a good group of people that I'm fishing with and against. Really cracking lads, all up for a laugh, and fishing serious again. It's always serious. There's never any easy rides. And like I said, being battered by Emma yesterday. Emma's battered a lot on there. In fact, she's reigning champion at 2 leagues. So it just shows you fishing is not about strength. It's about what you've got in here. You don't need to be strong. You just need to be reasonably fit and have a good angling brain. And I'm afraid Emma's angling brain is, I think she's been transferred from her dad. She's brilliant, and respect to Emma.
What would you change in match fishing to make it better?
Question that people ask a lot. What would you change in match fishing to make it better? It'd be nice if you could sit in a peg and I had 10 carp and 10 F1s to catch and 20 roach and 3 bream and everybody else had the same. But that's not possible. Make it better. There's not a lot really. I mean, obviously, I'm passionate about my fishing. I'm passionate about catching fish and winning. And some people take that wrong way sometimes. They think, you moan a lot and you're grumpy and groaning about your peg and it shouldn't be in. But that's because I'm passionate. I want to compete. And when you're on a peg that you can't compete, it's a downer for everybody, even though I still do what I need to do. It's very rare that I pack up and finish, and I can't remember the last time I packed up early and finished. I've always took it till end, and there's always that hope, 2 fishing, and I can get in and whatever. There's not a lot you can change really. I think most of it's been altered. It's all one of the things that has been made fishing unrecognisable these last few years is bomb and feeder fishing. It's completely changed. If you look at Lindome, 60 and 70 people turning up in a winter on the bank fishing. The payout's brilliant. Aaron puts food on. You've got all ages. They're not all young people because you don't need to be physically strong to fish with a bomb or a feeder. And some people who's winning are older than me. You know what I mean? So it's the angling blade's still working, right? They might be a bit steady on the feet, getting to the pegs and what have you, and don't carry a lot of stuff, but you don't lose your angling commitment. If I was going to change anything about bomb and feeder fishing, it's a bit feeder masses that you could fish with. You could feed with a catapult, because I think fishing's hard enough without putting obstacles in way to stop people from catching fish, and I think not using a catapult makes it more difficult. If you wanted to fish European style matches, do it totally. Don't just pick and choose European ways of fishing bomb and feeder or international SIPs or whatever it is do it all. That you have to have no more than a litre of bait, no more than 25 kilo of ground bait, or whatever it is that it is for SIRP's rules. Don't just pick and choose some of it and say we have to have this and you have to have that. You can't use a catapult. Fishing is difficult, really, really difficult. If you're fishing if that was to get you into international matches, fair enough. But if it's just like feeder masters is just for UK, or anybody who comes to UK can fish it and qualify to do it, but why put obstacles in way to stop you from catching fish. I don't understand that. I remember when I was a young lad, on my first years of fishing the Trent Open matches, a swim feeder had just come in, and I made myself, going back to me making equipment again, I bought a carte blank. I used to make some of my own rods when I was younger, and I bought a carte blank, an 11-foot carte blank, spliced a quiver tip in it, and made a feeder up. Made myself some swim feeders out of welding tubes, 1.25 inch tube in, and cut them down, and moulded some leads at work. I used to make lead moulds at work for me fishing. And won a few matches, and did all right, and won a few sections on works up matches, big matches. But amount of people used to read it in angling press. It should be banned. It's not pure fishing is running a stick float and a waggler. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing better than catching fish on a stick float and a waggler. But you can't disinvent something. And when somebody comes up with a way of catching fish, why make it difficult? I can remember with Jigger, the lad who made the Yorkshire Digger, who's dead now, bless his soul. Amount of people that said, "Oh, that's crap way," and he challenged people. I remember him challenging Andy Bennett. Says, "Well, I'll pick a venue, F1 venue. You fish fixed rig, I'll fish this, and I'll beat you." And he would have beat him. He would have beat him at that time. And Andy wouldn't take him on. And Andy's a F1 in disguise, I think. Like, he's probably one of the best commercial anglers in the country, bar none. But people didn't like it. Now, through time, it's been accepted, and people now, I've had people say to me, because he showed me how to use it, and I've went and said, "You're not putting that in an angler your calibre, using one of them." I said, "It catches fish. Why don't you put it in your armoury and let it do what it needs to do?" And I don't see why you should ban methods that catch fish, unless it's stupid using or arming your fish, and that's it. And I think back to feeder fishing, using a catapult changes it. If you couldn't use a catapult in our bomb and feeder fish, it would virtually cut down the amount of fish caught by 70%, because you can't feed 3 pellets with a feeder. You just can't do it. So that's the only thing I'd change.
You've achieved so many things in angling. What's next for Steve Cooke?
I've achieved so many things in angling. What's next? I should love to win another Fishermania. I really would. Even though I'll attempt to qualify, the venue would never suit me. Westwood Lakes never suit me. But last year was all more carp than F1, so perhaps I should love to end off on another one of those. I want to just keep competing as long as I can. Competing against highest level, against top anglers. Age is a terrible thing. We've all got to face it. We've all got to grow old. I don't want to grow old gracefully. I want to grow old with a rod in my hand and still going fishing and getting mucked up and what have you. And if truth be known, probably fishing cost me my marriage. I had to make a choice. Do I want to still go fishing, or do I want to go walking hand in hand around market? I wanted to go fishing. We're still friends. So carry on competing is what I want to be able to do. One of the things that definitely happens with age, your decision making, your ability never changes. The ability is always there. But your decision making, when you think, right, I'm going to feed down that edge, I'm going to go down there in 2 minutes. You look at your watch, it's an hour. That all changes. And it's noticeable when you think, well, I've left a few in today because I never did what I planned to do. My plan, and all plans are fluid. All on a riverbank, they're always going to be like, or on a bankside. It's always going to be fluid because you've got factors that make it like that. But when you say, right, this is how my day's progressing to now, this is what I need to do next, and then you look at your watch and you've dragged it along. I always remember, I mentioned him earlier, a lad called Alan Barker, when he used to go down Whiteacres. And one thing we discovered, I smoked, and so did Alan at the time. It was all meat fishing, so you put a pot of meat in down edge straight away. If you got a nice peg to do it, we put some meat in straight away. And then maybe on an hour, hour and a half, you put a little bit in and then you go and have a look. Now, I don't know if you've seen people who fish down edges. Because your edge is generally fishing for big fish, there's always going to be a bigger stamp down your edge than anywhere else in your peg, generally. When people come into the edges, they tend to come in and they sit there and they fish for 20 minutes, half an hour and don't go bite. Whenever carp's in your edge, you get a bite virtually straight away, or an indication, a line or something, you know there's some there. So we used to light a cigarette up, come down the edge, pot in, drop it in. If you hadn't got a fish, by the time you had that cigarette or missed a bite, you'd feed it again and go back out. And that were our timer. Now, I don't smoke anymore. That timer down there, you look at your watch, think, right, I'm going to be really accurate, I'm going to give it 2 minutes. You look, you've had 5. Because that timer's gone. So it's really difficult sometimes to do that. And that's what you lose with age. Your timing, your sense of doing things changes. And it's really difficult. You have to think about it all the time. Well, before I never used to think, right, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to have 2 more chucks there and then I'm going to go there. And now you think, I've had one there, I'm going to give it 1 more chuck, and you spread it out. Well, that decision making was instant before. And your best anglers, your Steve Ringers, your Jamie Hughes, all your top anglers, them decision making is swift and quick. I used to fish teams of 3 with me, Steve and Phil Ringers at Makins. And they used to phone up all the time and be chatting away. But one thing I learned really quickly was your best anglers, that decision is instant. And I'd speak to Phil or Steve. He says, Steve, how you doing? He says, all my fish are to my left. There where all best pegs are. So I fish as long as I can down my edge to my left. I've had 2, he says, but I've had to start up another line. I says, how long ago did you start up? He says, straight away. And he'll feed 6 or 8 pellets and drop straight on it. He doesn't leave it for half an hour to build up, because he thinks that your fish are there and he moves to where his fish are rather than waiting for them to come to him. And when you think about it, they only have in your peg, they only have a finite area to go in. So if they're not in front of you at 10 o'clock, they may be at 12 o'clock or they may be at 2 o'clock. So he forever starting new lines up, and he'd have more lines than a naughty school kid. And that were at Makins on, say, phase 2 or whatever. So that sort of thing, as you get older, becomes really difficult. So hopefully keep competing, get my decision making at the right times and my timing's right, and the fishing looks after itself.